There was Linda's shiny black SUV, the kind with chrome rims and a vanity plate, nose down in the muddy pond at the edge of my farm, wheel spinning like a blender, water bubbling around the bumper while she stood on the bank shrieking, "Somebody do something!" And me? I was sitting in my old excavator, coffee in hand, watching like it was the Saturday matinee. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Why would a middle-aged farmer deliberately sink his neighbor's car? But you gotta understand, this wasn't about a vehicle, it was about respect, or the lack of it, and how one entitled HOA president thought she could roll right over the wrong man's land. I grew up here, on this patch of soil. My dad worked it before me, and his dad before him. We raise hay, a few cows, chickens, simple life, but it's ours. Out here, the only rules are nature's. Fix your fences, plant in season, keep the well clean. No one tells you how tall your grass can be or what color to paint your barn. That freedom is what I love about farm life. For decades, it was quiet, until a subdivision popped up about a mile away. They paved over cornfields, slapped on the name Willow Creek Estates, and called it a gated lifestyle community. And with that came the HOA, a little kingdom of folks with clipboards and bylaws. At first, I didn't care. They could manicure their lawns into putting greens if they wanted. But then came Linda, the self-proclaimed lifestyle chairwoman, strutting around like she owned half the county. The first time we met, I was selling honey and eggs at the farmer's market. She looked over my booth, wrinkled her nose, and said, "This is quaint, but don't you think the presentation could be elevated? People in our community expect standards." I laughed and told her, "Lady, these are eggs. They came out of chickens this morning. Not sure how much more elevated they can get." She smirked, tossed her hair, and said, "Well, in Willow Creek, we value a more refined lifestyle. You should visit. It's like a resort compared to," and her eyes slid down to my boots, caked in mud. That was my first taste of her superiority, and trust me, it was only the appetizer. Not long after, glossy pamphlets started showing up in my mailbox. "Join our beautification program," they said, with notes in her handwriting. "Your barn is the first thing visitors see. Please consider repainting to align with community standards." Then I found a paper taped to my barn listing so-called violations. Unpainted structures, improper storage of equipment. They had no authority, but she acted like my farm was just an extension of her subdivision. I crumpled the notice and tossed it, but deep down, I realized Linda didn't see my land as mine. She saw it as hers to tame, and she didn't stop there. Soon, HOA folks were wandering close to my fence line, snapping pictures of my cows, whispering about potential nuisances. One even told me they were documenting livestock odor for community review. I said, "Buddy, that smell is called a farm. Cows moo, cows poop, get over it." He scribbled notes like I'd confessed to a crime. I tried patience, I really did. My dad always said patience is a farmer's strongest tool. But Linda had no boundaries. Almost every morning she'd roll past in her SUV, window down, hollering things like, "Barn's still unpainted, I see," or "Your hay looks sloppy from the road." Sometimes she'd slow, just to suggest my yoga group would love to practice by your pond. It has potential, you know? Each time I waved and smiled, but inside, I could feel the dam cracking. Then one morning, I walked out and there it was, her SUV parked smack in the middle of my hay road like she claimed it with a flag. She sat in the driver's seat, scrolling her phone, calm as could be. I tapped her window and said, "Morning, Linda. You know this is my land, right?" She smirked and said, "Technically it's just rural access land, and under municipal code that can be shared. So yes, I'm within my rights." I laughed. "Rural access land? That's not even a thing." She shrugged, rolled her window up, and left the car there for 3 days, bragging to her HOA buddies that she'd found a new overflow parking spot. They even posed for selfies next to it like it was a tourist attraction. By the 3rd day, when she gave a tour to new residents and announced, "Thanks to this underutilized land, we have expanded parking," something inside me snapped. I told her, "This is private property, not overflow parking." She smiled. Sharing builds community spirit. If you don't like it, file a complaint with the HOA. That night, I sat on my porch, beer in hand, staring at that SUV, and I thought, all right, enough's enough. A week later, it escalated again. I woke up to find a giant event tent set up on my pond, pastel tablecloths, pitchers of mimosas, and half a dozen yoga mats rolled out on my hayfield. Linda stood in the middle wearing a sun hat, sipping Chardonnay, declaring, "Welcome to Willow Creek's first farm-to-table brunch." Chickens were pecking at ponytails, ducks nipping at ankles, cows mooing at the fence like they wanted to join the party, and she had the nerve to say, "We're honoring your heritage." I told her, "Heritage? Lady, my chickens are attacking your yoga class." She smiled. Authenticity adds charm. Then she leaned close and whispered, "You don't understand. Change is coming whether you like it or not. Best to cooperate before it gets messy." That was the moment I decided I was done playing nice. See, I've got this old excavator, a steel beast that's been with me through floods and fence building. And I knew the pond banks like the back of my hand, looked solid, but soft underneath, the kind of muck that swallows boots whole. So I hatched a plan. I spent the evening loosening the soil near the spot she loved to park, smoothing it so it looked harmless. By morning, it was perfect, a trap hidden in plain sight. Sure enough, Linda showed up, SUV shiny as ever, HOA entourage following like ducklings. She parked right by the pond, stepped out, and announced, "Much better view here, perfect for weddings and retreats." I climbed into the excavator, fired it up, and started nudging dirt behind her car. The ground shifted, wheels sagged an inch, then another. She screamed, "You're harassing me." I shrugged. "Looks fine to me, but you might want to check your tires." The SUV groaned, sinking deeper, mud climbing the wheels. She jumped in, gunned the engine, tires spun and sprayed sludge, but the ground had her. With one gentle push from my bucket arm, the SUV tilted forward, sliding nose first toward the water. The HOA crowd gasped, clipboards dropping. One woman screeched, "Do something." I sipped my coffee and said, "Don't worry, I am." And then, with a slow, delicious inevitability, the car slid into the pond until water lapped at the hood. Linda shrieked, mascara running, calling it terrorism against the HOA, screaming she'd sue me into bankruptcy. Neighbors gathered, laughing, filming on their phones. Someone joked it was better than the rodeo. When the sheriff arrived, she ran up covered in mud, yelling, "Arrest him, he destroyed my car." The deputy asked, "Ma'am, whose land is this?" She sputtered, "Well, technically his, but it's part of our community atmosphere." The deputy chuckled, "Atmosphere ain't the law. He warned you. You trespassed." Her insurance refused the claim, too. Turns out, parking an SUV on private farmland isn't covered. And when I showed the deputies my conservation paperwork proving the pond was federally protected wetlands, well, that was the knockout punch. Suddenly, the HOA realized they weren't just humiliated, they were liable for every yoga mat, every tent stake, every mimosa spilled on my soil. Fines up to 50 grand per violation. Their faces drained like somebody pulled a plug. Word spread fast. Videos of her SUV sinking went viral. Memes, remixes, captions like "Community standards meet farm standards." The HOA scrambled to distance themselves from her, but the damage was done. Within weeks, Linda moved away, and the SUV? Towed out in pieces, the bumper hanging in a local bar like a trophy. And me, I went back to baling hay, feeding cows, listening to the quiet I'd always loved. Except now, folks driving by slowed down, craned their necks at the infamous pond, maybe snapped a selfie. I didn't mind. Let them remember. Looking back, it wasn't really about the SUV or even Linda. It was about boundaries, about how far you let people push before you stand your ground. My land isn't just dirt, it's my family's history, sweat, and calluses poured into every acre. When someone disrespects that, they're not just trespassing, they're stepping on your very sense of self. And sometimes standing up for yourself isn't loud or violent. It's patient, it's creative, and when the moment's right, it's unforgettable. So I'll raise my glass to that pond, and to the lesson it gave. You don't mess with a farmer's land, not unless you're ready to watch your pride sink to the bottom. Now I want to hear from you. Was I right to let the land teach her that lesson? Or was it too much? Have you ever had a neighbor or an HOA push your boundaries? Drop your story in the comments. Hit that subscribe if you want more. And let's see where y'all stand on this, because respect for boundaries, that's something we all wrestle with sooner or later.